the last time I've done that. So this is awesome.
So you're going to do it now. Hi, happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Sisters Interviews. I am Baroness Shaxi, Order of the Laurel. With us, and my real life sister is Sir Rifkin, Knight, Pelican, Lion of Antir. And with us tonight is Marquessa, Laurellen de Brandevin, Laurel, Pelican, Lion of Antir.
Complete badass.
Oh, and Countess and Viscountess. Yes. So, an amazing artist.
Aw.
So, welcome.
Hi. So we'll just start at the beginning. I sort of know some of your background, but the people watching don't. So if you could tell us, where you started in the SCA and how you found the SCA, that would be great.
So I first heard about the SCA when I was in high school. My then boyfriend's sister had been in college, and she had been in college, I want to say back east somewhere. And she started talking about this amazing group that was on the campus and how they dressed up and they put on armor and they fought. And as we were about ready to go to college, she's like, you should look it up and see if there's a group there. And so I went to Bozeman, Montana, and it took me 2 years to find the SCA because, and it was a tiny town and a tiny group. And I was working in Godfather's Pizza because I was working my way through college. And I said something to one of the drivers, come to find out all the drivers, all 5 drivers at Godfather's were in the SCA, but they never talked about it. So I'm like, well, oh my God. So, what do we do? How can we do this thing? And one of them said, okay, well, there's this event and this is February in Bozeman. So you had to, have your snow tires and wear your parka. And we drove up into the Bridger Mountains and I wore this horrifying dress. I mean, I shouldn't say it's horrifying. It was a very earnest attempt, but it was like knit with daisies on it.
Oh, wow.
And then it had, and then I made a blio with a zipper, and it was out of like polyester. And I felt like a princess. I thought I was looking good. And my boyfriend, we went to Goodwill and got him a lady's blazer. And a pair of ladies' boots. And he wore sweats and a lady's blazer and a pair of boots. And so we drove up there, and the guy that brought us met us, and he's like, all right, so I'm going to sit you at this table next to this other couple. It's their first event too. And so we sat there, and nobody talked to us. I mean, we just sat there the whole time, right? And I remember thinking, wow, I'm not entirely certain what's going on here. And then they had a head table. It was the knight, his lady, and his squire from Salt Lake City. They had driven up from Salt Lake City, which is in winter, which is pretty impressive. And they'd put the table out in the middle of the room, and we were all facing it. And so I was like, are we going to watch them eat? What is going on here?
Is someone going to get up and dance?
I was like, I don't understand what's going on here. And then there was a bread ball fight, and I was just like, okay, well, I don't think this is the group for me. And so I was like, okay, well, okay. And I actually hadn't planned to go back. And this guy kept inviting me to do things. And finally that summer, while my boyfriend was at boot camp, I went to another event. And that event is what hooked me, because that event had everything. The King of Atenvelt was up, and the Prince and Princess, Crown Prince and Princess of Atenvelt were there. And it was at Sealander Park, which is Barony of 1,000 Eyes, Idaho Falls. And Sealander is just beautiful, and so there were like canvas tents and people in armor. And that event was where I was like, okay, I like this. But my first event it didn't hook me. So.
Is this like late 80s or early 90s?
What's that?
This like late 80s or early 90s?
Yeah, so this is 80, oh my God, 87?
Wow.
Yeah, because it took us a couple years to find the SCA, so yeah, 87.
So then how did you, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Please.
After you, sir. Misty, go.
I was just gonna say, so how did you find your niche after that event?
So that second event I went to down at Sea Ladder. Oh my God.
Oh, she missed it.
I saw it, so. So that second event that I went to, it was in the summer, and that event was really that's where I saw fighting for the first time, and actually picked up a sword and shield to just try it on. So that's kind of where I started being interested in fighting. That is the first event that I wore clothing that I was proud of, and you know, was pretty appropriate. It's the first event that I actually got to paint someone's shield. I mean, you know, that event at Sea Ladder, that second event I went to, had everything that I became interested in. I got to court herald. That's where I started the process of finding my name and device in the SCA. Oh my God, there was singing. There was a bagpiper. So the next morning we get up and there's this bagpiper, and it's Misty and he's on the hill. And I mean, there was just every feeling that you hope to get from an event was packed into this one event, my second event.
Wow.
So yeah, I have some real fond memories of that second event. And I think it was the first Artemisian coronet list when Artemisia became a principality. I think it may have been the second. I mean, that's pretty blurry. So
do you remember who won? You probably had no idea.
Thorfinn and Sarah. I do remember that.
So someone will pipe up with the history and which one it was now. So
right?
Yeah.
Who was your first king and queen then of Atenveld? Do you remember who they were?
Kveldolf. Kveldolf was the king. I don't remember the queen's name. I don't think I ever saw her. Kveldolf's the only one I saw come up. And then after Kveldolf was Brian and Anna. And they came up a couple of times. So yeah, so the first king I ever saw was Kveldolf, and he was dressed as a Viking. And he was sitting on the throne, and he had the giant horn, you know, crown on, and he had a stein and a turkey leg. I mean, it was everything, right?
Nice.
I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. So yeah, I mean, like I said, that second event had everything. It was everything that got me hooked.
So you said you painted a shield at the second event. Did you bring your own supplies, or they just had them there?
You know, for some reason, and this is why I think it might be two different events I'm thinking about, but this is where I met Raphael and Kyrie, because it was Raphael's shield that I painted.
Oh, wow.
And it was, for some reason, you had to have a painted shield for this tournament. And somebody said, oh, well, Laurellen's an artist. She'll paint it for you real quick, right, as you're waiting to go on the field, right? And so they handed me some paint and just a wide brush. And so I had to split the brush to get a small enough thing to paint with. Yeah. so that was Raphael's shield, and him and Kyrie, they were fighting in the list. And they went on to become Prince and Princess of Artemisia, I think second or third, if I'm not mistaken.
That's cool.
So somebody says that was the first coronet list, but
was it?
I'm not sure. Yeah, Kelly thinks so.
If Kelwin says it was, then it was.
It was. Because Kelwin knows.
Owen knows.
Yeah, I can never remember, because I really got hooked in the SCA after that event. I just started going to event after event after event. And being in Bozeman, I mean, you're 4, 5, 6, 7 hours away from everything. We were 7 hours away from Salt Lake City, 24 hours away from Phoenix. And Atenveld at that time was from the Canadian border of Montana all the way down through Arizona. So if the king wasn't in Salt Lake City, we never got to see them. I take that back. Every once in a while we'd see someone, but it was rare. It was really rare. My first 2 years, I thought Brian and Anna were perpetually king and queen. They're the only people I saw.
What got you into Elizabethan? Was there somebody already doing Elizabethan at that time, or did you pioneer that?
No, so I started out doing hennins in like 12th, 14th century with the blio and the hennin and all the hooplins and things like that. And I went to a coronation in Salt Lake City. This is Brian and Anna's coronation. And they walked out in blue velvet Elizabethans with the, all the accoutrements. And I was like, oh, I didn't know you could do Elizabethan. I thought you could only do medieval stuff, right? So I was like, you can wear that? Oh my God. And I went home right then and there and started making Elizabethan. So yeah, it was, oh my God, it was so hot. They must have just been dying because it was, blue velvet, but it was so beautiful. And so, yeah, I didn't know. I thought it was just about medieval stuff. So somebody's like, oh, well, you can go all the way up to 1600. So then I started looking at what that meant and realizing that, oh my God, I could do all kinds of stuff.
That's awesome.
So how long from that second event did it take you to get your armor together? I remember you had pretty cool armor.
Yeah, it was not that, I want to say I was on the field at Estrella, my second Estrella. So my second or third year in, and they put us on the front lines because, of course, we didn't know what we were doing. and I remember getting run over on that first battle, and the first battle was amazing. I mean, there's just nothing like feeling 150 or 200 guys rushing at each other, right, in armor, and that feeling was really amazing. And then I got run over.
Did you get run over from behind or from in front?
Oh, from in front. Somebody's boss just got into my face, and I'm like, and
I got run over from behind the first time I fought.
Oh, did you?
No.
Yeah, no, I didn't get run over. I didn't get friendly fire, but I suspect that the boss that I got planted with was from on tier. I've always suspected that. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I really enjoyed war fighting specifically, because you could get out there and you could just have a good time. There was there wasn't anybody really watching. There wasn't I mean, there was crowds, but my favorite thing to do was to find some spearman, because I was sword and board, and get a spearman and go around and look for people to kill, because I could protect them and then I could pop somebody, and that was amazing. I enjoyed that.
I still like that part. That's like the only part of it that I like. So you were Princess of Artemisia, right?
Yeah.
When did that happen?
5th or 7th. The same year I got my laurel. 25th year. I went to 25th year in Texas, and then if I remember correctly, I was elevated, because back then they didn't give you the choice of whether or not you wanted to have a vigil. You just got elevated when they offered it. I think I was elevated, and then I became princess like 2 months later. It was like boom, boom, boom that whole year. And I'm thinking it was 25th year, because I think I had just come back from Texas. It was, that whole year is blurry because so much happened. I still have trouble and I have no pictures of my laurel. I mean, nothing. I was the last piece of business at that court, and it was like midnight. Wow. And I was so tired, and I was wearing crappy garb, so I'm not actually bummed out there's no pictures, because I the perpetually seeing horrible garb as a laurel thing would kill my soul.
We're gonna go through your myriad of different arts. But people always ask, what are you laureled for? So what were you laureled for?
Oh, there was a couple things. As I remember it, it was for costuming and for illumination and calligraphy, and for music and metalsmithing. Those are the big four that I did when I was there. I don't do illumination and calligraphy anymore. And I don't do a lot of music anymore. But those were the big four that I was kind of doing at the time. And as I recall, that's kind of what I was told. But again, that was a while ago. So I am kind of fuzzy on all those details. I do remember right after I was elevated and they'd closed court and I was walking back and somebody asked to be my apprentice, like right then and there.
Oh!
And
back off!
Hold on. I don't even know what this is yet. So give me a few minutes. It was weird. And then the other weird question was somebody asked me about beer brewing. I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how to do that. So that was weird. It was interesting, but weird.
So music is something that I don't think a lot of people know that you do. Because since I've known you, I haven't really seen you do it much in public. So right. What instrument did you play?
So I did band and choir when I was in high school, grade school and high school. So I did a lot of band. I did like 10 years of band. So I played flute, clarinet, and saxophone. So when I first came into the SCA, recorder, right? I just gravitated towards recorder. But while I was in the SCA, I got the wild hair to buy a harp at my first Estrella. And because the car was just packed to the gills, because we were driving from Phoenix to Montana, the harp had to sit on my lap the entire 24-hour drive.
Oh, wow.
So so I basically kind of worked out how to play it on that drive. And it was just a tiny little thing. And I kept that for a couple of years. And then I graduated to a larger one. And then I sold that one and I made the one that's up in the living room right now, the one that I play now. So yeah, I think the SCA, that's one of the things that I really liked about the SCA, that the ability to be able to pick up something at a merchant's, like, silk floss that you just can't get at Joann's, and or a harp, for God's sake, or whatever else, and be able to kind of pull that into whatever I was doing at the time. I used to, oh my God, we used to live for February for Estrella War. I remember we'd all kind of gather in December and, okay, so how many undershirts do you have? How many underdresses do you have? How many dresses do you have? How about your gamizin? Does it need to be fixed? And then from December to January, we would just make this huge move to fix everything and make things. And then we'd pack the car as, like 2 sets of armor and sets of dresses and a kitchen and a couple of tents. And then we'd drive to Phoenix, and we always drove through Las Vegas, and we would have lunch or breakfast in Las Vegas, and then we'd go on. So yeah, February in Estrella was a big part of my early years in the SCA. It really was very interesting, although I wasn't so keen on the driving. It was a long drive.
And this is still from Bozeman, right? So that's a really long drive.
Yeah. I-15 down through Salt Lake City, and then Hoover Dam and over.
Wow.
Somebody's asking if your Laurel was a surprise.
Yes. Oh yeah. 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 I know. They asked me to swear a bunch of stuff, when they bring you in court, and you go out and you're on your knees and they're like, do you swear blah 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 blah? And I was like, sure. I have no idea what you're asking me to do, but sure, why not? You're the crown, I'll swear to whatever. And and I literally the next day somebody had a corpora there. I'm like, all right, so I need to look up what I just
what have I done?
What is a Laurel? What did I do? What did I swear to? Because I mean, it just wasn't on my radar. It actually, I mean, someday, of course, I wanted to be a Laurel. That was the second event I ever went to. The girls that took me down, they were telling me okay, so, this is a Duke and you call them Your Grace, and this is a peer and you say, Your Excellency, or whatever. They were saying all this, and they were talking about all the peerages, and I'm like, so a knight, they get a knighthood for fighting, and a pelican's for service, and a laurel's for arts. And I'm like, bear in mind that I'm very young. I'm like, I want to be a laurel someday. And the whole car's like, oh my God, you can never say that, because if you say that, the laurels won't ever let you be a laurel. And I was just like, okay, I won't say anything.
Take it back.
All right. Don't tell anybody. So it was a surprise, because I really wasn't, I wasn't looking for it.
Yeah.
It was really kind of weird. I hadn't been in the SCA all that long. I didn't really understand what a peerage actually, I knew that they were special people, right? They were people of excellence. And I knew that when you had peerage meetings, they would go into a room with a bottle of wild turkey and have a meeting. I knew these things. But and sometimes draw on each other, because sometimes they would come out, with drawings. And I was like, I want to be part of that club.
Sounds a lot more fun than what we do now.
So yeah, so I was young enough that I didn't really understand what a peerage was. And I remember the first, second, probably third year of being a laurel before I really grasped what peerage was about. I remember having some real difficult soul-searching moments, asking myself, am I a good laurel? Can I be a good laurel? Does what I do make me a laurel? Or, and so, yeah, it was interesting. It was a very interesting.
That took me about 9 years.
So you weren't apprenticed to anyone then?
No. There were no laurels in the state of Montana.
Okay.
There was a pelican and a knight that had come in and then left. So there were really no peers in the state of Montana when I was there. The closest peers were in Idaho Falls and Salt Lake City. And, and thankfully they traveled a lot. But yeah, there was really nobody to apprentice to.
I have another question from our peanut gallery. What gave you the idea to start the Bard of Artemisia?
Oh, that has to be an Artemisian asking that.
It's one of the Kennison ladies.
Nice. So I was deep into learning how to play the harp. And I was reading every book I could get my hands on about bards and harpists. And there's this tradition that happened in Ireland, and I might mess this up, but this is kind of what I was thinking. In Ireland, bards enjoyed a very special position in the Irish culture. And so they not only are they people who entertain the court, but they're also people who are wise and have, the ability to talk to the prince or the crown or whatever, and give them wisdom and what have you. And I thought that would be a really interesting thing to have in Artemisia, because we didn't have, we had an arts and sciences champion, but there was no like bard position. So yeah, so I was a college student at the time, and I spent probably $40 buying all the fabric for the Bard of Artemisia cloak, which was significant back then.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. And then I appliqued and embroidered it, and then gave it to, I forget who was the prince and princess at the time. I can't remember. Anyway, so I gave it to them and said, here's this thing that I think would be a nice addition to Artemisian culture. So yeah, it all started from, if you really want to trace it back, it started from me buying that tiny little lap harp in Estrella and getting really into it, researching it, and then deciding that it would be a cool thing to do. So
back that up a second. Okay, so you decided that this Bard of Artemisia thing would be cool, and you weren't princess at the time. Right. You took it, ran with it, made a fabulous
I think I was princess later.
What?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And the prince and princess said, yes, let's do this.
I think that I think you're asking me remember really, because I was doing music at the time, I think the Prince and I had a much more specific conversation. But yeah, I mean, it was just kind of, I mean, and this is one of the things about Artemisia at that time. I don't think there were that many people in it. It was a small area and we all knew each other. So yeah, I think I just kind of ran with it.
That's super cool. And they still do that? They still have a part of Artemisia?
They do, and somebody says that they still have the cloak that you made and it is treasured.
Oh my God. You guys need to let me redo that cloak. Oh my God. I can't believe it's still alive. It was the best I could do at the time, but it's bad. It's polyester, and so you Artemisians, you got to let me redo that cloak for you, because I can't believe you still got it. I'm surprised it's not falling apart, to be honest.
Well, I don't think they're going to say no to that.
It's so funny how you make things for Kingdom regalia and they get like almost deified. It's a weird thing.
I mean, I love the fact that I can make something that people treasure. But for my own personal, I often get embarrassed by that, because, you know, as an artist, you end up getting better and better as the years go by. And so when something comes back at you, you're just like, oh God. You know, and you can't really do that, because people are like, this is this thing and we love it. And I'm like, good.
It's a relic.
Yeah, so yeah. It's also cool to be able to look back and see, not just for you, but for other people, how far you've developed in your art in, you know, the last couple of decades.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I never dreamed I would be at the level that I'm at right now. And the SCA is really, really responsible for that. The ability to make things.
And you're
kind of get into.
You're breaking up a little bit, so I had a hard time knowing that you were still talking. I apologize.
Sorry. I feel like SCA has been really supporting that for me. You know, if I want to learn how to do something, I research it, or I talk to someone, and then I make a thing and see how I feel about it. And I just think that the SCA has been super supportive. I wouldn't be where I'm at without it.
I feel the same way. It's what has kept me in the SCA, is the arts aspect. When I discovered the SCA, I met you, and you taught me how to use a sewing machine and how to lube it up. And we did, and Misty too, Rifkin as well, sorry. And you opened up whole new worlds, like production lines, so like war tabards or something in your attic. And
right.
that tradition of teaching and passing on knowledge and being tough, making me take things out and redo them, but also, you know,
not right.
Yeah, make it right. And I grew so much.
Right.
And one of the things I really strive to do is to pass that on to other people. I think it's the best thing about the SCA. So thank you.
Yeah, I do too. You know, it's fun to see people that I've met take it and run with it, right? I think that the SCA has that magical ability. I mean, because so many artists, I was just talking with Gwen the Potter about this today. So many of us as artists, you know, we're in our room and we're all by ourselves and we're making things. And the SCA introduces this sort of group support for artists. And you can get together and you can have a sewing circle, or you can teach people, or you can learn from somebody. And it keeps art from being lonely. And I think that helps people grow as artists. I think it's important to have people who are sounding boards, or have people who you can learn from, or you can teach, because I get as much out of teaching as I do my students, I hope. Because you have to think about, okay, how am I going to break this down into chunks that people will get? And that's very useful. And I think the SCA, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and the energy that you get from people that are really excited and fresh,
right?
And, you know, and you're like, okay, I'm going to try not to crush your soul.
I feel like whenever I teach a class, I want to get them interested. I want them to get excited about it, because there's going to come a time when you're going to look at what you're doing and you're going to think it is absolute crap. And whether or not you get over that hump, I think has a lot to do with how much energy you brought to the project, and how many people you can go to and say, this is crap, help me fix it. And, you know, and so, yeah, I think that, I don't know, the SCA has really, that's a magical part of it for me. It continues to be a magical part of it for me. I love teaching, absolutely love it. And I would not have discovered that if it hadn't been for the SCA. So thank you, SCA.
So I want to go to the PowerPoint, because I am familiar with your art, but I don't think everyone is. And so I stalked you like I do on Facebook, but not creepy. And we'll just start with your embroidery, because let's see.
Well, first we get to see their costume and rough.
Yeah, there's some embroidery on this costuming here. And then I'll go one more slide as well.
Wow.
Go to that slide too. And there was a lot to choose from, and I just sort of took some of them. But it's all different time periods and cultures, and I just kind of wonder what inspires you and what I guess motivates you to learn new things and try new cultures.
Oh, well, I think the newness of it, right? I mean, I started out in the SCA. I started out in the SCA doing like 14th century, and then all of a sudden I fell in love with the 16th century. And then I took a huge step back and I got into Anglo-Saxon. And then I saw my first Scythian stuff. And the Scythian stuff reminds me enough of my own heritage, because there is a lot of cognates there stylistically between Bitterroot Salish peoples and the Scythians. That's a part that I kind of wanted to explore. It's just, I think of it as these vistas, right? These vistas of things, and you just head out into the unknown, and that I find amazing. That's learning a new technique, or learning about a new culture, or learning how to make a new thing. It just feeds on itself. That's something that I don't think I'll ever stop. Periodically I'll get obsessed about something, but most of the time I'm always looking at new stuff. I have like a list of things that I'm constantly researching, constantly looking at, constantly trying. And it just, so yeah, what you're seeing is me just not being able to focus on one time period, right? So yeah.
So is that how you keep everything you're interested in organized? I know you're a big list maker.
I am. I have huge numbers of lists. I have, I maintain like several different lists. There's a couple of different levels. And now you get to see a peek into my OCD brain, right? So I have a list I have a bucket list of things that I want to do in my life. I have a bucket list of things that I want to do in the SCA. I have a bucket list of things that need to be done this year. And I have a list of things that need to be done this month. And I have a list of things that need to be done today. And so I set a goal, and I'm like, all right, well, I would like to learn this thing. So first I have to research about it, and I have to kind of look at the motifs, and I have to think about what I want to learn, and something will suggest itself. And I'm like, all right, so if I want to make this coat or whatever, and I want to make it as nice as possible, what do all the coats look like? And so then I go off and I look at all this stuff. And so it's really all about kind of, I don't know, researching everything, researching broadly, and then focusing on one little thing. But by the time you're done doing that one little thing, because these things that we make in the SCA are not just discrete things in these cultures. These things that we make are actually in context with a larger view of the culture. So these motifs mean something. These motifs occur in different places. Materials are used in different places. And so learning about all this, learning how the materials are used, learning what the motifs mean, it means that you learn about the culture as much as you do about the thing you're creating. And that makes me absurdly happy. I love knowing that kind of stuff. I love researching things. I love, if there's something that I can't find, it goes on the list of things that I constantly look for, and eventually I'll find it. Eventually I'll figure it out. And so yeah, it's like a little puzzle box, you find this thing and you figure it out and you make a thing out of it, and then you're like, oh, but there's this thing over here, and that's kind of cool, and I'll make that. And yeah, it's I don't know, it just keeps me going.
So awesome. What's your next question, Misty?
Oh, I thought you were going to talk. You looked poised to say something, so I was ceding the floor.
Well, I was having thoughts about one of the things that you mentioned, that the Scythian stuff is sort of like your native culture. And one of the things that I have done a lot of soul searching with over the last few years, and I actually stopped making Scythian things because I was worried about cultural appropriation. And am I respecting the culture enough? Is this a living culture? Is it not a living culture? Where is the line here? And I still don't have a clear answer to that. But I'm doing it because I love and respect this culture so much that I can't not do it, because it's kind of an addiction. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have had to think about that a lot, because I think about it from the point of view of someone who is of Native American descent, who grew up on a reservation, whose father was Native American. I deeply steeped in that. And for me, I don't think, and this is just an answer to your Scythian question, I don't think that it's appropriation simply because you're not punching down. And what I mean by that is you're not appropriating that and then making money off of it, or using it to nefarious ends. You're being respectful.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a huge, big deal. I've had to think about it a lot since the SCA rewrote their inclusive statement, and the possibility of people doing Native American persona has come up. I've had a tough time with that, to be honest, because I do think that could potentially be punching down. And so I think it's good to think about it, and I think it's good to be careful.
Yeah.
But there's a level of respect when you're trying to remake things, when you're researching it so completely like you do, that I don't think it's possible for it to be disrespectful, because you are, like I said, you're not just making this thing, you are looking at the culture. And so this thing is in context with the rest of it. And I think that's an important part of doing some other culture besides yours. And so I would hope that people who want to do Native American persona would be like that, would contact the tribe that is still out there, still living, and say, I would like to do this. How can I do it respectfully? Rather than just slapping on a war bonnet and a pair of fuzzy boots and wandering through an SCA event, which is not respectful and is appropriative. So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with context, and I think it has a lot to do with respect. And so yeah, it's good to think about.
I agree.
So I have a sort of follow-up question on that. So, the SCA is a big tent, and we like to encourage people to play at the level that they can. So where's the line between making an attempt and playing at like you can and being disrespectful?
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, it's tough. I think for me, the line is there when you decide you want to be a Native American persona, and you go out to some website in Indonesia and you buy yourself a headdress. That may be an attempt, but it's disrespectful.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where I land on it. If someone comes in and they're doing, the best they can with what they've got, because we've all been there, but they are earnest in their attempt, I think that's the difference. And it's hard because you can buy just damn near anything on the internet these days.
Right.
There's just so many different websites. And I referenced the website in Indonesia because there is actually a website in Indonesia that's selling Native American stuff.
Interesting.
And I reported them because I'm an awful person, I guess, because they were on Etsy, and I just found it disrespectful.
Yeah.
They had these medicine drums and war bonnets and all kinds of other stuff, paraphernalia that is still in use in some cultures.
And those are religious items.
Yeah, they're very religious items, or items that you need to earn. Wearing a wear bonnet is like wearing a white belt. You didn't earn it. You shouldn't wear it. And so, so this website was just selling us stuff, and they had these, very beautiful models wearing this stuff. And I just like, all right, where's the Etsy report button? report, cultural appropriation. And nothing will happen for sure. But I felt better. I felt better for ratting them out. So there's something. But yeah, it's hard, especially when you start out, because you just don't know. I mean, I remember being there. I just didn't know. I didn't know that you shouldn't say you wanted a laurel, which I disagree with. But
so do I.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that my zipper in the back of my dress was horrible. I didn't know these things, and so when you don't know, it actually is incumbent on the rest of us who are in the SCA to be kind about that, to find out where it is that you are at before landing on you with both feet. And because I remember not being talked to my first event. If someone had come up and said, that dress is horrible, you shouldn't have a zipper, I would not have come back. And so, I think that there's a responsibility for the rest of us to be kind and assume no malice. And that can be difficult. I mean, when somebody's cosplaying what you consider to be your culture, it's kind of tough. Yeah. But always remembering that it's probably not out of malice.
Just ignorance.
Right.
And that there is,
and we're,
go ahead.
Oh, I think the SC is a great place to learn, right? Where these lines are.
Right.
And I think that, if we can err on the side of kindness, we would be a little bit better about it.
No, I agree. There's a kind and graceful way to educate people and encourage them to reach different heights, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I want to go back to this laurel thing, because I think a lot of people are interested in that. Like, my goal was to be a knight, and nobody ever told me I couldn't say I wanted to be a knight. It was perfectly acceptable. So I never understood why in the arts field saying that you wanted to be excellent would be unacceptable.
Well, so here's the thing. You strap on a red belt, or you strap on a gold belt, or you strap on a green belt, and you are implicitly saying that you want to be that thing, right? It's okay to say it implicitly, but apparently it's hubris to say it explicitly. And I have never had a problem with that. Where I have a problem is someone saying they want to be a peer and then doing nothing about it.
Yeah.
And then whining because they're not getting a peerage. And I think that's where I have the issue. Not that they're saying they want to be something, but they're saying they want to be something and then not putting in the work. I think that's more egregious, to be honest. I've never.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm just gonna say I've never. And in fact, Dawn, I think you and I had a conversation very early on about laurelhood.
Yeah.
And I think you said something to the effect of, "I'd like to be a laurel." I'm like, "All right, well, here's how you do it." Instead of saying, "Oh my God, don't say that," basically saying, here's how you do it, and
give yourself 10 years. You know, be prepared.
Yeah, I remember saying that.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to actually encourage people rather than discourage them.
I agree, and I think that what happens when you get to the point where you are recognized in any peerage is that you are recognized as a knight, you're recognized as a pelican, you're recognized as a laurel, and that means that you've already ingrained yourself in that peerage. You've already made yourself a part of that group. It means that you have to make friends with those people. You have to have connections and community with those people. And you have to have some of the same traits as those people. It doesn't mean you have to operate exactly the same, because everybody's got different personalities and there's different niches and different ways of operating for everybody. But you have to be a part of that group in order to be recognized as a part of that group.
Right. And how can you do that if you're not actually explicitly taking those actions, saying those words, behaving in that manner? Yeah, I've never understood why people hushed me up. And it was my second event, so I was like, all right, well, I won't say anything. But you can bet I stalked every laurel that was on that event site. What are they doing? Why are they a laurel? What are you doing? Is that embroidery? Did you do that? So yeah, I may not have had a laurel of my own, but I did my fair share of stalking some of the laurels in Salt Lake City. I shouldn't say that because they're probably watching. Yeah, I watched them. I watched them closely.
You're on stage.
Right? You just didn't know it.
When you were watching them closely, were you looking for things to emulate, or were you looking for the level that you needed to be at?
I was looking for behavior to emulate. What is a peer? What do peers do? I didn't have a cohesive idea of what level my skill set should be at. And I took off anyway. I mean, I've been sewing forever. I learned to sew as a kid. I learned to embroider as a kid. So in many ways, I kind of wandered into the SCA with a skill set already under my belt. I just had to kind of tune it towards history. But definitely I was looking at emulating behaviors. What makes a peer? Why are these people respected? And so yeah, I stalked quite a few people.
Who are some of your favorite examples from then as peers and from now as peers?
Oh. So there was a Mistress Carol of Stargate was in Salt Lake City, and she was a metalsmith. And she was quite possibly one of the most brilliant artists that I've ever met. And she was one of the nicest laurels I've ever met, and would not hesitate to sit down and show you stuff, talk with you, teach you. I felt like she was, and I still feel like she is probably one of the people that I still try to emulate. And of course she doesn't know that because I never said anything before I left. And of course I grew up in the SCA that was pretty much Brian and Anna were king and queen, for like 2 or 3 years there constantly. And so they gave me good behavior to model. Mistress Catlin in Salt Lake City, that was one of the peers that I looked at a lot. She did Russian, and it was the first time I kind of realized that you didn't have to stay in Europe. You could kind of go elsewhere. And when I get out over here, I think that Amanda Kendall was probably one of the peers that I really sort of gravitated towards on tier wise. I was already a peer when I moved here. But I love the fact that she was never mean, always kind, always ready to speak to someone. Again, like Carol of Stargate, always had time for people and always was very kind about it. And I think that those are the kind of behaviors that I try to emulate. Always having time to help.
And that's become harder and harder and harder, especially at events, because we're always at a meeting. I'm with my kids. I'm supporting my fighter. I'm supporting my sister. It's crazy. And it's one of the things that I wish I could improve on, especially time at events, because I can't help people at events. It's crazy.
So many meetings. Oh my God, so many meetings. When I first moved here, there were not this many meetings at a Crown event. And I sometimes dread going to Crown events. I secretly, while I was at Cornish this last 3 years, and I'd miss a Crown event because of school, it was because I just couldn't face an entire event of meetings.
Yeah.
And even when I wasn't in a meeting, somebody else that I was with was in a meeting, or, and so the meetings are starting to really drag it down for me. And of course, when Reese was small, not having that time to connect with people. And then this is another thing that I miss here on Tier. I miss Ithra, because Ithra was so dedicated to learning. I loved going to Ithras, and so we're kind of seeing a resurgence of that in other ways. Like the Athenaeum is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I miss those dedicated events to just doing that thing, because you can't do it at a Crown or Coronation anymore. It just is not possible. There's so many things going on, and God, I miss it. I miss sitting down with people and just hanging out and chatting and learning and teaching. And yeah,
it's one of the truly beautiful things about going out of Kingdom is you don't have to do all the responsibility things, and you can just do the teaching and do the playing and the conversation and just hanging out.
Right. Yeah, you get to know people.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think at like a structural level, we need to examine ourselves and what we can do using modern tools, like, the Google Suite or something, to take some of the pressure off of events and move some of our conversations and meetings online so that we can be the ambassadors that we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that